I'm sorting a blanket to spin, and I have to apologize in advance for the doggy growlies in the back. Anyway, I'm sorting a blanket to spin, and this is one of those things where you have to feel the blanket, and since these two are not as white, and you know what, that actually might tell you something, but since the two are not as white as each other, the first thing that you immediately look at is you go, well, they're, one's dirtier than the other, and that kind of helps you skirt. But actually, really, it's the texture. Okay, so if you could feel this, you would see that this right here is soft, and it's crimpy, and kind of, look at the way it fluffs up when you brush that fluffy crimp. Okay, this is flicked at the tips, what I usually do. Okay, so the second sample right here, if you look at it, it doesn't fluff up like the other sample. It's harder by feeling. It's not as much crimp. You can see that really clear about the crimp. It's not as much crimp. And so this is the prime, the first. This is seconds. And sometimes you think of seconds because it's a shorter fiber. So you'll say, well, the seconds and thirds are the shorters. And it's not just the shortness, it's the texture and quality of the blanket. This might be, maybe this is neck or underbelly or something like that. But it's a coarser guard hair. Yes, Dylan. So if it doesn't matter, you could just put them together and spin them. It depends on what you're doing with the project. But if you want something that is close to the skin, soft, you really do want to sort these two out. Okay. So as I go through the bag, I pull out and feel all the stuff that is going to be the prime. And I can tell by feel. Sometimes you get something you're not really sure about. But what I do is once I flick it and I see how it flicks out, it becomes really clear to me that it's not prime. Like this, there's almost no crimp in this piece. Of course, it is shorter too, but there's almost no crimp in it. And I know that this is going to be a seconds. There aren't a lot of thirds in this. This fleece was very well taken care of, this alpaca fleece. And look at this. See that long guard hair right there? I can pull those like you would a llama. And this right here, this is short. Look how crimpy it is. So I would separate these guard hairs on the end from this on this side and use this right here. It's going to make a really big difference when you spin up your alpaca. It'll give you something that is soft through and through, and you won't have any pricklies hanging out. So here I am with the alpaca on the wheel. It looks like I'm going to have some natural sunlight today. So I'm going to have my cup of coffee. Then I'm going to set up the Louet and the Ladybug side by side and do a little spinning with the alpaca. And then a little tail spinning on the Louet. Okay, with the socks done, here's what we've got going on for the month of March. On the far right, over there, is the violet dyed mohair for the tail spinning. And then lots and lots of fluffy alpaca. There's a couple pounds of that are going out for a trade, and that's what's currently on the Ladybug. And I had a friend request some Angora gloves, and so I'm going to try to get those whipped out in between like 15 other projects. And that's the pink mohair core spun, or core for the tail spun mohair. Now, I don't actually have to use a core when I spin the tailspin, and I'll probably get into that a little later, but I prefer to use a core, but at some point I'll do a little spinning without the core. So let me just reach over here, and this thing is going to bob a little. Okay, and show this to you. Hopefully you didn't see my poor little braids. I'm in between styles here. Okay, so this is my first time actually using a top whirl spindle. I prefer the bottom whirl spindles. And, you know, I really can't say I prefer because, like I said, this is really my first time. I used it for like 3 seconds a couple of years ago, so that didn't really count. The thing I find about the top whirl is it does seem to wobble to me. And some of that has to do with where I'm flicking it. And I think more of it has to do with the way I'm building my cop. And I learned that my drop spindling became more efficient on the bottom whirl when I learned how to build a cop. I mean, that made a big difference. So it may just be a matter of me building a cop properly. But I had some really nice merino, and then I have this really short stuff, which I think I ranted about some time ago. But I'm actually making some use of it, which is fine. And the top whirl is going nicely. Now, I can't remember, in the Gotland video somewhere, I kind of said some things about the Russian spindle, but my friend sent me a Russian spindle with a hook on it, so I'm going to give that another whirl and see how that goes. I always say that if I drilled a hook on the top of that spindle, I'd probably enjoy it a little better. And you know, the Russian spindle takes a bit of mastery. Each different setup for the spindle is a little different each time. It's just something you really get used to. See how short this stuff is? Like if this had been all my exposure to merino, previously it was. And I was just like, I don't want that. I don't like short fibers. This is almost as bad as spinning cotton. So at least I'm glad to know that merino doesn't have to be like that. I've got maybe 3 or 4 pounds of this short stuff. I'll finish this and then I'll find something to do with it. It looks like it wants to be a nice lace shawl. Okay, so anyway, let me go ahead and bring the Louet over here. Louet has been in storage for a while. As you know, I've been having issues with the wheel, and I just think it's just warped, or the screw hole is warped, and it's slowly, like gradually, been getting worse and worse. And I did try to stick bricks on top of it and kind of make it even. It's just going to be one of those things. I really don't have any intention of getting rid of it, and especially because I mean, it's got the larger orifice of the two, and I don't really see any reason to buy the jumbo flyer for the Ladybug any more than I felt the need to buy the lace flyer for the Louet. It just is what it is. So I'm going to need it to do the bulky yarns, and I'm going to keep it and use it. All right, now, this is Mohair. 1 ounce of Mohair. Does it say the yardage on it? I don't think it does. Okay. Hopefully Dylan will not make this a big issue. All right, hang on. Okay, with the cat in the room, Dylan is going to behave like a surefire nutcase. That just pretty much is what that's all about. And the cat wants to be in the room, and Dylan wants to be in the room, and I want everybody to be in the room. So it's one of those things I just have to deal with. Okay, so anyway, let's see. Aha, so it spins. It spins again. I always let a little in there. Okay, so basically, I'm going to kind of decide in the air how this goes. The white tip is what's going on to the core. And I did the fuchsia with the white tip. And you know what? It almost another white tip actually shows in the scarf. It all shows in the back of the scarf, but not in the front. And I kind of wanted it to show a little on the front, but that's not how it worked. So it turned out cool anyway. And I'm going to be really careful which one of these I separate, because some of these tails are really nice and some of them didn't really survive the washing. And that's how I decide what becomes the tail spun, what becomes the lock spun. Just let that pull up on there. And it gets a really nice wrap on there. And covers the core. And I'm not so much worried about covering the core. I think the first one I did, it was undyed locks, and the core was green. So I covered as much of the core as possible. But I also discovered, too, that in the weaving process, a lot of that core doesn't get seen anyway. So I didn't worry too much about it. And it's a little decorative. I think I'll go ahead and split this. Let me see. We want to preserve as much of the lock at the end, which of course is why this is tail spinning, as possible. And there we go. A little more take up needed for that. And I gotta tell you, I am just really going. I'm really hooked on this violet. Really hooked on it. Now I'm doing this, of course. Well, you know, I always hate when people say that. Obviously, and it's not really obvious. If you don't have a Louet or you don't have a Ladybug, then you don't know that the orifice sizes are dramatically different. So, and the hooks too, really. So this yarn might not go through. Well, it'll go through the orifice of the Ladybug, but I don't know if it'll go through smoothly without catching, because the orifice of the Louet is quite a bit bigger than the orifice of the Ladybug. And also because the hooks on the Louet are thicker and not as sharp at the edges, it's least likely to catch. You know what? Let me stop the camera, go to a second segment. So I took the flyer off of the Ladybug because it's a lot easier to do that since that's already in there. But anyway, okay, first of all, let me get close. And you can see, like, seriously, it's not the camera. That's really that much of a size difference between the Louet and the Ladybug. And then with that in there, you really can't see the orifice. Maybe you can sort of see it. I don't know. I wish I'd turned on the light there in that spot. But I can stick my entire index finger in the hole of this. I never use an orifice hook. In this case, I can just get my pinky finger. So if you think of the difference between a pinky finger and a index finger, are the differences in the sizes of the orifice for those two wheels. Okay, they are like really misbehaving today. Probably cabin fever. I'm not much of a cold weather person, so when it gets like super cold, I don't always want to go out and play. And they always want to play. Okay, so far, I'm just putting it on there. At some point, I'm going to reach some of the locks, like I said, that didn't really survive the washing process. And so those ones I will tear up completely and kind of use them to lock spin wrap the core. so there won't be any tails. And actually, right now this is pretty close together. Oh, we got some more stuck somewhere. Right now this is pretty close together. They don't have to be this close together, especially if I'm weaving. I don't really need to have these tails this close together. It's just that they were all really beautiful, and I didn't want to shred them up to fill up the space. And so I did not lock spin them. I decided to tail spin them instead, and showcase the tail of the yarn. Or the tail of the lock, I should say, as opposed to kind of covering it. And they're not spaced, you know, very far apart. But they can be, and you know what? I would probably say, I'm trying to get the bag off the floor without bending down, getting into the picture. Okay, so anyway, let's pull one out. I'd probably say the longer the lock, the greater the space I would generally put in between them. Because when you have all those long locks hanging down, or at least when you do with the scarves I'm making, when you have all those long locks hanging down, they just kind of get in the way. I don't think they feature as well as when you just have a few here or there. So I do like to space them appropriately. All right, so much for that. You'll see more of that as I wind on. And I'm filling up this bobbin. There goes another dog hitting it again. For some reason, as soon as I start videoing and turning on the camera, they go right up to the tripod and start banging at it and doing all kind of unbelievably interesting things. They never have any interest in this ever until that time. It's like their whole goal is to see how close they can actually get and how much they can knock the thing around. Dogs. And the alpaca. And then there's Jules, or Julie, who's down there at my foot. And if she can't get up in my lap, she's going to be on top of the spinning wheel treadles. And so I should start calling this spinning with dogs, because basically that's what I'm trying to do here. And actually, this is the way it is all the time. I'm always spinning with dogs. They just seem to know when the camera is on and what to do about it. Okay, so I did find my spinner's control card behind the dresser. And if you're not familiar with the spinner's control card, here's what it is. And basically it shows you what thickness of yarn you need in order to get a 2-ply of a particular weight of yarn. So technically, if you double this, this is a single for a fingering. And of course, it's give and take. That's why there's a range on here, because between this and this. So it's not like an automatic thing because yarn blooms. But for the most part, if you're a tight worsted spinner like me and you fit it in the hole and you ply it, depending on your fiber, you get somewhere pretty close. And it just helps. It helps if you're trying to get an exact yarn. So this is, anyway, this is part of the Spin for Trade. This is that wonderful alpaca that was sent to me by Sandy. And it's going really nicely. Let me make a small adjustment. I suppose I could make the adjustment myself. Okay, here we go. And you know what? I don't even know what weight that blanket is. I'd probably say it's about 5 pounds. And so I'm going to be at this for a little while. That will be just fine. This right here is from that big pile over there. Sorry about the aluminum foil in the back. I used the foil on the card making. So it looks kind of odd, but it's really cool. I also use the foil to sharpen my sewing scissors. So basically, this is all hackled out. And actually, I just hackle the ends. Everything for me is the tips. I go tip to tip. When I brush, tip to tip. When I hackle, the only time when I'm using the drum carder, I feed it in tip to tip too. I just do. It's all some type of semi-worsted prep, if it's not completely worsted. Okay, so, and it just feeds out from the tip nicely. This is a really nice length, a really nice texture after I skirted out some of the harsher guard hairs. And I just let it feed out. I know exactly how much fiber I need in the drafting triangle to produce the thickness of yarn that I want. And it just becomes automatic finger memory, a little bit of eye memory. A lot of finger memory though, because I could look away from the drafting and still get about the right thickness. In between my fingers, they know how much should be there and how much should not be there. And I don't really need to treadle this fast. I actually moved it up from the last swirl because it was easier to adjust the whirls than it was to slow down. But as I was teaching a beginner, complete novice at the rabbit show last week, learning how to use a wheel takes, I don't know how to say this. It takes several different skills at one time. Okay, first of all, you're learning how to pinch and pull forward, and you're also pinching on the fiber where it's coming out. So I'm pinching, I'm pulling forward, and then at the same time as I'm pinching and pulling forward, I'm releasing and then sliding those fingers backwards with just enough opening that the twist is coming up to the yarn or to the fiber I'm sending forward, but not enough opening that it's coming into the fiber source here. So it takes a bit. You know, you pinch hard enough to pull it forward. You pinch hard enough to keep the twist from going in up the fiber. Then you pull back, allowing a little bit of twist to travel slightly in between your fingers, but you're still pinching hard enough that it's not going up into the drafting zone. So that's like 3 skills already by itself. Then, of course, you have to know how far you can pull that fiber forward based on the fiber staple for it not to just kind of come apart or get crazy on you, you know, or you have to know how to control the fiber that's in this hand. So that's a thing right there. Because, it can get like a bunch of crazy right here while you're trying to feed it, you know. And if you let a little bit of twist up there, it can start pulling from here or there or there. So you've got all that going on. So that's like 6 skills. Then at the same time, you're treadling. Okay? You have to know what foot to push down first in order to get the wheel to spin in the correct direction. So it's not going backwards. Some wheels will go back a bit if you let off of the treadle, especially the single treadle ones. I find that's sometimes a problem. And sometimes too with the single treadle ones, or depending on where it stops, even on the Ladybug, I have to kind of give it a kickstart. Then you have to know how fast to treadle in order to draft out, because sometimes you're treadling faster than you can actually draft, or you're drafting faster than you're treadling. So you kind of have to learn how to walk your wheel, you know. And it seems to me a lot of times beginners, I explain it to them, it's kind of like a bicycle where you stand on one of the pedals and kind of push yourself off and then start pedaling. But a lot of that too is that they tend to go really, really fast. It's like they're on an exercise bike and they just go flying. But you can't really do that if your hand skills don't match the speed at which you can actually spin. So I can treadle really fast, and my hand skills do match that, but it takes a while, and there's a lot of coordination going on here. And sometimes I have to actually pause, which is why a lot of times when I'm talking to you, like there's just pauses, because I'm my brain is doing this and my brain is talking at the same time. And sometimes my brain can't do both. I have to stop and let, the concentration go to the actual spinning, especially when I see an issue with the spinning. This is a little too thin in this spot, so I have to stop, fix it. Or when I'm switching. So there's the wheel is complicated. The spindle is complicated. The wheel is complicated, basically. But you'll see this alpaca over and over and over again. And finally, after about 3 years of spinning pounds and pounds of fiber, I finally decided that I wanted a swift, a yarn swift. And I was looking at some of the swifts, and one of the ones I wanted, the best one I saw that I really, really liked was in Russia. And who knows when that's going to get here. And I was like, So I had made one years ago, and I really couldn't get it to spin properly. And I had been looking at Lazy Susan tops. Well, finally, it just occurred to me, I saw it, that the Home Depot has the Lazy Susan metal ball bearing pieces. And so finally I took my one that I had made and set aside because I couldn't get the spin correctly, and I put the ball bearing plates on it from the Lazy Susan, and so now it's mounted on my wall. So instead of using my knitting knotty to skein up all those hundreds of yards of fiber, now I've got an actual real life swift. Okay, I'm trying to keep this in the camera view, but normally I spin or feed the fiber at least arm's length away from the orifice. Okay, so it's time to switch. All right, enough of that. I don't think you really want to sit here and watch me spin the same monotonous white fiber for half an hour. And then again, maybe you do. Somebody said they found that relaxing, just to sit and spin or watch people spin. So anyway, off with that guy. And so far we've seen the drop spindle, the Louet over there with the tail spun, core spun. It kind of hits 2 points right there. This is the alpaca we've got going on. Dylan's up to his mischief. Be nice if he show his face in the camera. And what I'm going to do is switch this bobbin. I've got 2 more left that aren't full. I'm going to switch this bobbin. I'm going to hackle the Angora alpaca mix for the fingerless gloves. And then it's a nice violet. It'll be violet and white. And that'll be something to look at. And come back with that. And then show you a little bit of how I'm planning my garden in the next few segments. Okay, so making a pair of fingerless gloves for a friend's sister. And this will probably be the last pair of fingerless gloves I make for the season, because it's coming up on spring. And generally in the spring I do a lot of spinning, but not necessarily a lot of knitting. And I'm kind of behind on my project. The goal for this year was to see how much yardage I could weave. But I needed to put out some things in my Etsy store. And then I accepted a spinning contract for a friend. And so that kind of changed things. So I'm a little behind here on the spinning for the weaving. And so my plan is for the rest of the year is to spin the yardage for the weaving. So anyway, it won't be my last time that I spent Angora, because actually I think I told the Bunny Spinners group that I wanted to have a sit spin knit, so maybe I'll make one more thing. Anyway, so I've got the alpaca that I dyed with the ultraviolet colorway, or as close as that ultraviolet as I could get with what I had. And it's the funny thing, because this hackle, usually I put it on the computer facing the other direction. And this is a better setup turned this way for the actual filming. But the clamps don't fit on the hackle. So I've only got like one clamp on. So I'm just going to take this really slow. So hopefully you can get a good idea of what this ultraviolet looks like. The alpaca. And I'm not measuring this out. Really. I have a rough idea of how much fiber I need for the yarn. I've got plenty. And when I'm done spinning and knitting, it'll just be something left over I can do with. So I'm not really obsessed with weighing it out. Nor does it actually matter the blend. Okay? This is not something I need to... It's not like I'm making socks or something I need to know an exact blend of anything. I really don't need to know an exact blend of anything at all. I know that this, whatever I'm putting in here, will be enough Angora to give me a good Angora halo with this yarn. So right now I am using the hackle to blend for uniformity of color. That's the goal here. That's actually what I'm blending for here. So I don't necessarily need to get an even ratio of Angora to alpaca. What I can tell you is something I've mentioned in my other videos, is that anytime you have a blend that is 25% Angora or more, the blend tends to behave like Angora. Okay? So that's going to be the big thing. Is anytime this blend becomes 25% or more Angora, it's going to spin more like Angora. It's going to want that extra twist like Angora does. I'm going to pull that up. I see there's big chunks of white. I want to get rid of those. And I don't need a 100% blend as far as the colors. I don't need it. It's okay to have a few white streaks in the color. What I don't want are really big white patches. There's still an occasional piece of VM in there. I'll just go ahead and pull that out. So I'm just going to keep doing that until I get the desired effect that I want. I know there was a big chunk of white here. Well, it's a little at the bottom. Oh, there's a chunk there. I could whip out my Viking combs and do this too. It doesn't matter. This is not a really fine hackle, and the Viking combs I have are not really fine either. But they're good enough for blending. And they actually do pretty good at teasing out the fibers for the alpaca. Like I said, that's how I did the alpaca here on the hackle. Okay, so it's a nice soft lavender look right now. And that is good enough. And that's how I'm going to do all of it. Let me see if I can get that a little closer. Maybe you can get a better idea of what that color looks like. It's a really nice soft lavender. I'm going to go ahead and hackle this because that's a big chunk of white I don't want. That's it for the Angora. At some point you'll be able to see it spun up.